Good morning, everyday people, and welcome to my brand new series we're doing here on YouTube. So what we're going to do is walk you through everything you need to know about Adobe Lightroom to make a photo go looking like this to looking like this over here. Now, towards the end of this series, we will have to jump into Adobe Photoshop to do just a couple of little things, nothing major, but I'm going to teach you guys how to make the dullest looking photos into something you can actually have as usable. Now, if you'll check in the description box below, there will be a link so you can download this original raw file image, so that way you guys can follow along with me with this particular image if you want. If you have an image that you would like to work on, feel free to use that one as well. But other than that, let's go ahead and get started today. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do with this particular image is get this thing exposed a lot better. Now, I do tend to underexpose my images slightly. This one I actually underexposed quite a bit because of the cloud structure back here. The clouds were just kind of very ugly this day. There was a very overcast out. It was raining. It was just not the most glorious thing. However, you can see that with some power of both Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop, you can turn something very dull into something very beautiful. So what we're going to start with today is the brush tool. And more specifically, we're going to be looking at this auto mask feature, which I'll show you in just a moment. But the auto mask feature can be found in the brush tool, the radial filter tool, and the graduated filter tool here. But for the sake of today, we're just talking about the brush tool. So what I want to start with is to show you guys how you go about masking something in order to get maybe an exposure increase. So for example, these mountains here need to be increased in exposure to kind of more match the foreground area here, and then we can do an overall exposure increase afterwards. So what we want to do, I'm going to go down here and click show selected mask overlay so you can see what's happening and what's going on here. And what I'm going to do is just select my mountains. Now I'm going to do this relatively quickly. You would want to slow down and really take your time with this, but I want you to see what's already happening. We're having some bleeding with our mask, so it's actually bleeding over these mountain ranges on the tops and bottoms. And I'm going to show you why that's a problem here in just a second. And also, let me just go ahead and zoom in really quickly. I'm going to hit Z on my keyboard. I'm going to use spacebar to kind of be able to click and drag and pull this image around, but I'm going to actually manually move in and try to select areas here. And you can see even with my brush a little smaller, trying to take my time a little bit here, it's still not doing a very good job at masking all this in. So I'm just going to go ahead and just quickly grab this. We're going to zoom back out really fast and just select all these ranges. And now I'm going to hide my mask. Now, all I'm going to do is start pulling my exposure up so that these mountains here kind of match the water and the sand. Now, the goal is not to increase the exposure a lot, but to just kind of match it up with everything else. But as we start to pull this in, you can see that it's bled over. So our mask we created bled over into the clouds and even a little bit here in the lake, and it's causing this really weird kind of glow around our mountain ranges. That's something that we do not want to have. So how do we get rid of that? Well, the auto mask feature. So what I'm going to do is reset this image really quickly here. I'm going to click on the auto mask feature this time. I'm going to go ahead and show my selected mask overlay, and then I'm going to repaint in this image. Now what you want to do is be careful to stay along your guidelines. Like, you don't want to overlap your mountains, but if you put kind of like the top edge of the brush here along that edge that you want the mask to be, and you just click in and hold it in and drag across, it's actually going to do a very good job at masking in your mountains. So just go over the different edges here, and then be careful not to overlap, because I mean, this thing isn't perfect. It could still go over the edge, because if you're pushing your selection over that edge line that's created, it's going to think that's where it wants your mask to be. Now I'm going to cut the auto mask feature off really quickly and just get some of these little areas that it kind of missed in the middle here. But for the most part, that's got our mountains. So let's uncheck our selected mask overlay, and let's start bumping up the exposure of our mountains here. And you can already see that's looking pretty good. So let's just go ahead and add just a tiny bit of contrast back in. Let's make our blacks in there just a little bit. Pull our highlights down and pull our shadows up. And what we're doing is just trying to balance out these mountains to fit with the rest of this scene. And I think we've done a pretty good job. So let's go ahead and click done. I'm going to do a little before and after here, and you can see the difference of this image. So that's a really nice balanced exposure there. And now that we have our selected masking done, let's go ahead and do an overall nice exposure for this image. So the first thing I want to do is pull my exposure up just slightly here to kind of get a nice look everywhere. And then what I'm going to do is kind of add some contrast back in there. I'm going to work with my blacks just a little bit, and then we're going to pull our shadows up quite a hefty bit because we're going to drop these highlights back down. And don't worry about some of the little sections here along the mountains that might have not got completely how we want them to, because we're going to work on that in later episodes. But overall, this is the look that you want to achieve for this very first video here. We're going to pick up in the next video, which will be coming out tomorrow, and the continuation of this process. Next, we're going to learn about the graduated and radial filters to kind of do some more specific work on the exposure, and then we're going to jump into presets and do all the other things that are required to make the image look like this. But I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you guys are super excited about this series. If you are, go ahead and leave a like on today's video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and as always, be sure to create something new today.